We've had feedback from some of our staff that they struggle with products and services we sell because they're kind of confusing. It's not that they don't know they're part of the business, it's that sometimes we refer to them by part numbers and other times by everyday descriptions or even applications or by vendor. And the way they're broken down on our inventory worksheet means that the individual pieces can sometimes be confusing. To prevent errors and make use of our worksheets easier, we've decided that we need to address the problem by providing a complete product and service description on our sales worksheet, not just part of it. The problem is our other worksheets and databases all use the parts in different ways, so we do not want to eliminate those fields or change them because doing so means that we're going to have to redesign and reprogram those other components as well. Instead, we need to leave the original data the way it is, but provide a more inclusive field that describes our products and services accurately and completely on our sales sheet. We're going to go ahead and do that by using text functions, because text functions can accomplish all of the things that we need. Text functions are sometimes also known as string functions, and they work with text, which is basically any type of data that's not a value or a number or a calculation. In Excel 2010, using this newer file format, the XML format or XLSX, a single cell can hold up to 32,000 characters. Not that we'd ever want to try to fill that up, but we do have plenty of room to create our new field with all of this information. So what are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to change what we did for our description. Home and student is fine, but really that's not complete. Home and student what? So we want to create a more complete description that includes several pieces of information. We want to include the vendor, the application, the version, and the description, as well as the category. In other words, is it a piece of software? Is it a virtual class, an on-site class, instructor-led training, those types of things. So several pieces of information that all need to be stuck together into one brand new field that didn't exist before. We do this by using the concatenation function. So by selecting our first description, and that's going to be cell J2, we can start by typing equals concatenate. And once again, we can choose that from autocomplete and press tab. The concatenate function, as we see, simply sticks different pieces of information together, and those can either be different cell values or what we call static text. Each of these is going to be its own argument, so separated by a comma, and if it's going to be static text, I simply need to type whatever I want to see and put it into double quotes. So the question is, what's the first piece of information I want in my field? And the first piece of information I want is the vendor. Well, we don't actually have the vendor on this worksheet, so what do? Well, we could click on another worksheet, but the actual vendor is going to depend on the item number. So we need to combine our concatenate function with a Vlookup. The Vlookup will determine what the value actually is. So we're going to kind of nest two things together here. The first argument is not something static or a specific cell, but actually a function that will return what we want. So we're going to type that function. Now we have to create the Vlookup function just like we did in the last lesson. We know what's in I2. We want it to then go to product services. This time we want it to return the third column, which is the vendor information. But we still want to force it to find exactly what we want. So there's our Vlookup function. We can now do the closing parenthesis. And I'm actually going to cheat a little bit here because I don't like to type all of that stuff over and over again. So I'm going to move up into my formula bar. I'm going to select that entire Vlookup that we just did, and I'm just going to press Control-C to copy it. Then I can click at the end and type my comma. So the first thing for Excel to concatenate together is whatever the appropriate vendor is by using a Vlookup. Now we need to make sure when we concatenate that we also include punctuation. In other words, I have to put a space between the name of the vendor and the name of the application. We do that by enclosing any kind of static text in double quotes. In this case, it's just a space, so it's very simple. Double quote, space, double quote. And then a comma. That's our second argument. Now, the next piece is going to be that actual name of the application. So I'm going to press Control-V as in Victor. That pastes in the lookup that I did, but I have to go ahead and change the column. I don't want to return the vendor again. This time I want to actually return the application, which is column 4. We'll come over to the end, do a comma. We need to put in another space. And we're ready for our next piece of information, which is the version. Once again, we're just going to paste, but this time referring to column 5. If you see that everything disappears, don't worry. Remember that in Excel 2010, we can actually have a resizable formula bar. So I'm going to move my mouse to the bottom edge, just like a window, get the double-headed arrow, and I'm going to stretch this out a little bit so we can see everything as we work. Then, of course, I can move my tooltip out of the way if I need to. And over here on the right is where I need to change this to column 5. I'll use my down arrow to move to the end, do a comma. And this time the punctuation that we want to put in is a colon followed by a space. So I'll do the double quote, colon, space, double quote, and a comma. Believe it or not, we're getting there. We have the vendor, the application, the version. Now we're ready to put in the description. So I'll do another Control V, and this time refer to column 6. This time our static text following is going to be a parenthesis because we're going to put the name of the category in parentheses. So we do our comma, double quote, opening paren, double quote, comma, and take a deep breath. This is our last one. We're going to do another paste, and this time we're going to refer to column 2. Our very last thing is to close our parentheses, so comma, quote, closing paren, and quote. There we go, we are done. Now, I know this looks really complicated, but all we've done is put together vendor, application, version, description, and category, along with several spaces, a colon, an opening parenthesis, and a closing parenthesis. Told Excel to take all of that information and put it together into a single field. Now the test is, let's press enter. If you ever find errors, and I guarantee as you start to work with these, you probably are, because you don't put in the right number of opening or closing parentheses or something like that, Excel is going to give you some help if it can. In this case, it says it found an error, and it says, but I know how to fix it. Do you want me to go ahead and fix it the way I think I should? I think this is usually your best choice because when we get into something like this, it's often harder for you to find it. So go ahead and accept the change, and if for some reason that change isn't correct, then you can go back in and manually edit it. I'm just going to press enter to say yes, accept the change. Now, in order to be able to see our beautiful new field that we just created, we're going to have to change the width of our column a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and double click. And then I'm going to scroll over to the right just so we can see this a little bit easier on screen. And now we can see Microsoft Office 2010 Home and Student Software. This is exactly what we wanted to see, and we've combined all of those individual pieces from our products and services sheet into one cell. Now we can go ahead and double click with the fill handle to fill that down. And you can see how much easier it is to get a good quality description, which is exactly what our salespeople want. Another reason to do this is because we've just created one field that could very easily be used for mail merges in things like letters and invoices. So I'm thinking we did a pretty good job, but I am noticing a couple of things that we need to clean up, which is very common with concatenation. First of all, when we look between the end of the description and the start of the category, there's no space. We need to add a space between the opening parenthesis. So let's move back up into our formula bar. Here's our opening parenthesis, and we just need to put a space between the opening double quote and the parenthesis itself. The other thing I think we'd like to do is we'd like to put that category into uppercase letters so it doesn't look like it's part of the description. This is easy as well. In order to do this, we're again going to layer another type of function inside of our Vlookup and inside of our concatenation. It goes right before our last VLOOKUP, and it's called upper. Because it's a function, we do have to put upper and then an opening parenthesis. And this whole VLOOKUP thing has to go inside of those, so I'll use my right arrow key to move over to the end and add a second closing paren after the 2 comma false. And what this particular text function does is it simply forces that particular entry into all uppercase letters. We have upper for uppercase, lower for lowercase, and we can even use proper to find proper case. Let's go ahead and press enter and see how this looks. There we go. It was a simple change, but you can now see how much easier it is to determine that software is a different type of category and not really the end of the description. That can be really important in a lot of cases. Now we just need to fill it down once again. And we have a beautiful new column of information with a good quality description made up of the pieces by using some of our text functions.